Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Naila Shuja and these are the headlines. Armenia, Azerbaijan and Russia have signed an agreement to end 6 weeks of fierce fighting in the Nagorno-Karabakh. Under the deal, Armenia has agreed to give 3 regions around Karabakh to Azerbaijan. The Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said the deal signed showed that it was a clear defeat of Armenia. Protesters break into the Armenian Prime Minister's official residence in the Yerevan after the deal. Indian troops have martyred 2 more civilians in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were killed during a cordon and search operation in the Shopian district. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout since the 5th of August 2019. U.S. President Donald Trump's campaign has filed a lawsuit in Pennsylvania challenging President-elect Joe Biden's win. The lawsuit targets Pennsylvania's Secretary of State and country boards over legislation's unfair elections. Trump has so far refused to concede defeat in the election, making unsubstantiated claims over voter fraud. The Taliban call on U.S. President-elect Joe Biden to stick to the Doha deal to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan. In a statement, the group said the agreement is the most reasonable and effective tool for ending the Afghan conflict. The U.S. has become the first country to cross 10 million COVID-19 cases with over 238,000 fatalities. India's death toll has reached over 127,000, while infections tally is nearing 8.6 million. Pakistan has reported over 1,600 cases and 23 deaths overnight as the toll hits 7,000. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1.26 million lives and infected nearly 51 million people. For news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Armenia, Azerbaijan and Russia have signed an agreement to end 6 weeks of fierce fighting in the Nagorno-Karabakh. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and his Turkish counterpart Mevlut Cavusoglu discussed the deal by phone. More in this report.
The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, which simmered for decades despite international efforts to mediate, erupted into fresh fighting in late September. Ceasefires have failed in the past 6 weeks. As of today, Azerbaijan, Armenia and Russia have reached a new deal to end the conflict that has left over 1,200 people dead. In a televised meeting, Russian President Vladimir Putin confirmed the total ceasefire.
Today on November 9, President of Republic of Azerbaijan Ilham Aliyev, Prime Minister of Republic of Armenia Nikol Pashinyan and President of Russian Federation signed a statement which declares the complete ceasefire and any military action in Nagorno-Karabakh war zone starting from midnight of November 10, 2020 Moscow time. The Azerbaijan Republic and the Republic of Armenia stop at the present positions.
Under the deal, Azerbaijan keeps its territorial gains and Armenia has agreed to give 3 regions around Nagorno-Karabakh to Baku. Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said the historic agreement showed it was a clear defeat of Armenia. Aliyev said Armenia signed the agreement due to Baku's iron fist, not Yerevan's own will. He also announced a Turkish and Russian joint peacekeeping mission in Karabakh. As part of the deal, Russia has deployed its peacekeeping troops to the mountain enclave of the region. In Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, news of the agreement brought people onto the streets to celebrate despite a curfew. But in Armenia, the agreement sparked outrage, with protesters storming Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan's official residence in Yerevan. They called for the PM to step down after he announced the painful deal.
In the existing situation, there was no chance of making another decision. I plan to tell more details, why it was made and what was the reason behind the last month's events. I can't do it right now for one simple reason, because stopping military actions are in the main process right now, and if I say something, I can endanger people.
Meanwhile, there are disputed accounts coming out of Armenia. The Defense Ministry says military actions in Nagorno-Karabakh have ceased completely, but Prime Minister Pashinyan says they were not over yet.
Indian troops have martyred 2 more civilians in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The youths were killed during a cordon and search operation in the Shopian district. The operation in the Kutpura area was jointly launched by the Indian Army and the Central Reserve Police Force Indian. Authorities have suspended internet services in Shopian and the Kulgam districts. The occupied valley has been under New Delhi's crushing curfew and communication blackout since the August 5th of 2019. U.S. President Donald Trump's campaign has filed a lawsuit in Pennsylvania challenging President-elect Joe Biden's win. The lawsuit targets Pennsylvania's Secretary of State and country boards over allegations of unfair elections. At a press briefing, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany said the campaign wants an honest, accurate, and lawful vote count. The lawsuit alleges Pennsylvania's mail-in voting system lacked transparency and verifiability that were present for in-person voters. The lawsuit claims Pennsylvania officials violated the United States Constitution by creating an illegal 2-tiered voting system. Trump has so far refused to concede defeat in the election, making unsubstantiated claims over voter fraud. Meanwhile, Attorney General William Barr has authorized federal prosecutors across the United States to pursue substantial allegations. In a letter, Barr asked the prosecutors to ignore financiable and far-fetched claims. U.S. President Donald Trump has fired Defense Secretary Mark Esper after a recent public fallout. President Trump announced the termination in a tweet. Trump wrote he was appointing Christopher C. Miller, the head of National Counterterrorism Center, as the acting defense secretary. Meanwhile, Esper said he was proud of his achievements in 18 months of service at the Pentagon. Criticizing the decision, Democrat Nancy Pelosi said President Trump is sowing chaos in U.S. democracy. In the weeks before President-elect Joe Biden takes office, Trump is still empowered to make decisions. The Taliban call on U.S. President-elect Joe Biden to stick to the Doha deal to withdraw American troops from Afghanistan. In a statement, the group said the agreement is the most reasonable and effective tool for ending the Afghan conflict. The Taliban said they are committed to all the terms of the deal. They added the group also wants to build positive relations with the United States and the countries of the world. At least 4 policemen have been killed in a car bomb attack in Afghanistan's Faryab province. Police say 20 people were wounded in the attack. The provincial governor said the chief of district police is also among those wounded. He blamed the Taliban for the attack. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack in the Almar district. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan is participating in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Council of Heads of State. He was invited by Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is chairing the meeting. The meeting is being held virtually due to the coronavirus pandemic. Leaders from all 8 SCO member states are attending, along with the United Nations Secretary General. The 20th meeting will adopt 16 documents, including the Moscow Declaration. Besides Pakistan, current members include China, Russia, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. China says United States sanctions on 4 Chinese officials in Hong Kong is a serious violation of international law. Washington imposed these curbs over their alleged role in the Hong Kong crackdown. At a news briefing, a foreign ministry spokesman termed the move blatant interference in the city's affairs. Wang Weibin urged Washington to immediately reverse the move and not go further down the wrong path. Hong Kong Chief Secretary Matthew Cheung dismissed the sanctions, saying they will not be intimidated. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the sanctions bar officials from traveling to the United States. He added their U.S. assets would also be blocked. The U.S. Treasury Department has imposed sanctions on another 19 Syrian individuals and entities. The department says those who provide support to the Bashar al-Assad regime oil production network are blacklisted. In a statement, the department said it imposed curbs on intelligence officers, including the head of the Syrian Air Force Intelligence. The department said it also took action against Lebanese persons attempting to revive Syria's petroleum industry. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said implementing a nationwide ceasefire in Syria remains the only path forward. He said the Assad regime has a choice to take irreversible steps towards a peaceful resolution of conflict or face further sanctions. Russian President Vladimir Putin says Syrian refugees who fled the civil war should start returning home to help rebuild the country. During a video call with his Syrian counterpart Bashar al-Assad, Putin said large parts of the Arab country enjoy peace. Putin said international terrorism has almost wiped out and return to civilian life should begin gradually. Putin's comments came ahead of a 2-day international conference on refugees in Damascus set to begin on Wednesday. Al-Assad said the conference will only be the beginning to solve this humanitarian problem. He added the main obstacle for the return of refugees are Western sanctions, which he described as illegitimate and unjust. Syria's 9-year-old conflict has killed over 500,000 people and forced about 5.6 million to flee abroad as refugees. In Iraq, 2 security personnel have been killed and 6 wounded in a roadside bomb explosion in the northern Kirkuk province. In a statement, Iraq's military said the bomb detonated near a military vehicle in Kirkuk village. The blast occurred 1 day after 11 people were killed and 8 wounded in an attack on a military post in the capital. Earlier, the Iraqi security forces carried out a series of airstrikes against ISIS in a recently launched offensive. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has slammed Israel's demolition of Palestinian dwellings throughout the West Bank. In a statement, the OIC said the action fails within the framework of the policies of ethnic cleansing and annexation. It said this is a part of a colonial settlement plan implemented by the Israeli occupation in the Palestinian territories. It said the move violates international law and the United Nations resolutions. The Muslim body called on the world to put more pressure on Israel to end its crimes in occupied Palestinian territories. Israel has demolished nearly 700 structures this year so far across the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. In Jordan, polls have opened in the parliamentary elections amid a surge in coronavirus cases. More than 4.5 million people are eligible to vote in 23 constituencies for 130 contested seats. 15 seats of the parliament are reserved for women, 9 for Christians, and 3 for minority Chechens and Karabakhs. Politicians have been appealing to Jordanians to turn out and vote amid widespread calls for a boycott of the tribal-dominated assembly. However, the reported turnout is disappointingly low. Jordan is facing its worst economic crisis in years, with unemployment and poverty exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Ethiopian military has seized an airport in Tigray's town of Humera. The town is located near the borders with Sudan and Ethiopia. The state media says the action is a continuation of the military response against the Tigray's People Liberation Front. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he is not disregarding international calls for calm. A government spokesperson says the Prime Minister acknowledges international concerns, but Tigray's conflict is an internal matter. She added Ethiopian government will ultimately make decisions in the long-term interest of the country and its people. Earlier, Sudanese media reported several Ethiopians, including soldiers, are fleeing to neighboring countries as the conflict intensifies. Over in the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has suffered a heavy defeat in the House of Lords over his controversial Brexit legislation. The Internal Market Bill contains measures that overrule parts of the United Kingdom's Brexit agreement with the EU. The Lords voted against a key clause that would allow ministers to break international law by 433 votes to 165. The government does not have majority in the Lords, and even some high-profile Conservative members opposed the clauses. London says it will reinstate the clauses when the bill returns to House of Commons next month. And now the Prime Minister, Imran Khan, is speaking at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
People have been affected by the virus, and more than 1.2 million people have lost their lives. The devastating impact of the virus has affected all aspects of human interaction, and especially public health and the global economy. While progress has been reported in vaccine research, it is unclear as to when the vaccine will become universally available. Humanity faces the possibility of a slow recovery and prolonged economic slump with rising poverty and inequality. Under the circumstances, the imperative of a common approaches to limit the spread of the infectious diseases, reduce the effects, and develop potential remedies has increased manifold. Yet, global harmony, multilateralism are undermined by rising geopolitical tensions, unilateralism, and isolationism. We believe that the SCO fraternity, with its core principles of solidarity and mutual support, would be effective in combating the effects of COVID-19. Excellencies, this year CHS coincides with completion of 20 years of the establishment of the SCO. Over the past 2 decades, SCO's prestige and influence have grown significantly. At a time when the world is bereft of global vision and shared solutions, SCO has called for effective multilateralism, with the UN playing a central coordinating role. Pakistan also deeply appreciates China's effective handling of the virus, and also the material and technical assistance extended by China to others, including Pakistan. China and Pakistan also are collaborating in vaccine development, with phase 3 trials successfully underway. On its part, Pakistan is open to sharing its own experience in effectively combating the pandemic and keeping the total cases and fatalities relatively low. Our collaborated policy of smart lockdowns and financial support to the most vulnerable segments of the society prevented rapid community spread, protected the poorest from the worst fallouts of the lockdown, and helped stabilize the economy. Our aim has been not only to save people from the virus, but also save people from dying of hunger. Globally, the international community has taken some welcome steps to mitigate the adverse effects of COVID-19. But much more needs to be done, particularly for the poor, who are hit the hardest, both in rich and the poor nations. In this spirit, I proposed a global initiative for debt relief, to address debt vulnerabilities of the developing world and to help create fiscal space for them to mitigate the impact of pandemic and achieve sustainable development. We welcome measures taken by the G20 and the international financial institutions to help developing countries, in particular least developed countries, to face economic challenges posed by the pandemic. Further steps are needed to help improve liquidity in developing countries and restore growth. Excellencies, the foreign policy goals of my government are in sync with the SCO's vision of regional connectivity and economic integration. SCO is destined to play a pivotal role in the emerging confluence between the Belt and Road Initiative and Eurasian Economic Union. Pakistan's geographical location provides it an ideal opportunity to crystallize the benefits accrued from the process. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, the flagship project of BRI, is poised to play a vital role in this regard. Excellencies, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization was established to ensure security and maintain stability across the vast Eurasian continent. Join forces to counter emerging challenges and threats, and enhance trade as well as cultural cooperation. SCO stands for strict observance of this principle and the principles of the UN Charter, such as equality and sovereignty of states, respect for territorial integrity, sanctity of borders, non-aggression, non-use or threat of force, and people's right for self-determination.
Welcome back. The United States has become the first country to cross 10 million COVID-19 cases with over 238,000 fatalities. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 1.26 million lives and infected nearly 51 million people. Over the last 24 hours, the world has seen two completely dichotomous scenarios related to the coronavirus pandemic. On one hand, the United States hit the grim milestone of infections mark. Two top vaccine developers have lit the beacons of hope. After the reassuring announcement of Pfizer and BioNTech, the World Health Organization called for faith in science. Experts worldwide have also welcomed the breakthrough as watershed moment in which indicates that vaccines can help halt the pandemic.
Well, my initial reaction, of course, was light at the end of the tunnel. A bit of good news, something to make us smile, because cases of COVID are going up around the country, which doesn't make us smile.
The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Boris Johnson, however, says it is still too early to rely on the COVID-19 vaccine. British Deputy Chief Medical Officer also seconds the Prime Minister, saying it does not see the vaccine making any difference for the second wave the United Kingdom is in now. In Russia, officials claim that their Sputnik V vaccine is also more than 90% effective. Meanwhile, Brazil has suspended clinical trials for China's Sinovac vaccine due to its adverse effects that occurred late last month. Like the rest of the Eurozone, Hungary is also set to introduce new curbs to stem the exceptional spike in cases. In France, authorities say the country is at a crucial moment as the peak of the outbreak is still to be seen.
You know it. A massive second wave is hitting the northern hemisphere, the United States, Russia, and Europe. The epidemic is progressing in Europe and France at different speeds depending on the countries and territories. All the regions of France are impacted.
Over in Asia, China has reported 22 new cases overnight. India's death toll has reached over 127,000, while the virus has infected 8.5 million people so far. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says he has tested positive for the novel coronavirus. In a tweet, the president said he will isolate himself but continue working. Minutes after Zelensky's announcement, Ukraine's head of the presidential office also said he had tested positive for the virus. Last week, the health minister said the coronavirus situation in the country was close to catastrophic. Earlier, Zelensky said Ukraine may introduce a lockdown at weekends in effort to curb the pandemic. Ukraine has so far recovered over 483,000 COVID-19 cases with nearly 9,000 deaths. One of the most prominent Palestinian political figures, SAED EREKAT, has died after contracting COVID-19. Palestinian officials say the 65-year-old chief Palestinian negotiator passed away at Hadassah Medical Center in Jerusalem. EREKAT was Secretary General of the Palestine Liberation Organization and an advisor to the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. He was the Palestinians' chief negotiator in peace talks with Israel for the past 2.5 decades. In Pakistan, 23 people have died from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, increasing the toll to 7,000. The health ministry says 1,637 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said out of over 346,000 cases detected so far, 319,000 people have recovered. It said there are more than 20,000 active cases in the country, with over 1,000 in critical condition. Amid the second wave, the authorities have imposed an array of stricter restrictions across the country. Pakistan-Russian Federation Special Forces joint exercise Drozabe-5 is underway at the Arbela area of the Haripur district. In a statement, Pakistan's military media wing said the exercise is aimed at sharing both armies' expertise in counter-terrorism. It said the participating troops busy in practicing counter-terrorism drills and procedures, rappelling and preparations for skydivings. The ISPR said sports activities are also a part of the exercise. The exercise, dubbed the Durbaz-5, will continue for 2 weeks. Earlier, Russian ambassador to Pakistan, Danila Ganj, said senior officials from both countries reviewed the exercise. In the Central African Republic, the Pakistani contingent of a UN peacekeeping mission has built a new bridge to boost local infrastructure. It was handed over to the local authorities in the Bangassou, a city in the southeast of the country. The city of Bangassou is opening up a little more to the surrounding populations with the creation of a new bridge. The bridge was built by the Pakistani arm of the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in the Central African Republic. It is one step to improve the road infrastructure between Bangassou, Rafai, and Zimo.
The bridge is quite an important tool that facilitates the movement of people. It is also quite an important tool to enable us to implement MINUSCA's mandate, which is centered on protecting civilians.
Carried out less than in 2 months before the elections, the rehabilitation of the road infrastructure by MINUSCA will facilitate the electoral process.
All the more so, since soon we will begin to receive within our walls the various candidates for the presidential and legislative elections who will travel through our villages, our municipalities for their campaign. It is appropriate here to say thank you and to perpetuate this collaboration.
Located 734 kilometers from the capital, Bangassou is a landlocked city that benefits from the Obangu River to trade with the neighboring Congo and the riparian regions. It took an average of a month until recently to drive from Bangu to the Obo city, even further east. This period could soon be reduced to 1 week. Kosovo's former president Hatem Thaçi has pleaded not guilty to war crimes as he appeared in a special court based in The Hague. Thaçi is facing charges over his role in the 1990s War of Independence, which left over 10,000 people dead. The court, Thaçi said, the indictment is completely without basis and he does not agree with any of them. His indictment accused him of heading an expertise that targeted, abducted, and mistreated opponents. Thaçi also faces 10 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity. He resigned earlier this month to face charges. Defense lawyer David Hooper says he will request that Thaçi be released pending trial. The tribunal was set up in 2015 to handle cases relating to alleged atrocities by the fighters of Kosovo Liberation Army. Bolivia's former president Evo Morales has returned to his country, extending a year-long exile. This comes after a member of his Socialist Party has sworn in as Bolivia's president. Morales crossed into Bolivia on foot after being accompanied by the border by Argentine President Alberto Fernandez. The former president was greeted by a large crowd of Bolivians who gathered to welcome their leader home.
I want to publicly ask the judicial courts to take an action of justice with the members and former members of the Supreme Court of Justice, the electoral courts, that there was no fraud last year. We won in the first round and now we have won again in the first round. What fraud?
Morales led Bolivia for almost 14 years as the first indigenous president. In Peru, the opposition-dominated Congress has voted to remove President Vizcarra over corruption allegations. Following a debate in the impeachment trial, the 130-member legislature achieved 87-vote threshold needed to oust the president. The president said he will accept Congress's decision and does not plan to take any legal action. In a speech, Vizcarra said that he will leave the presidential palace today.
Me voy a mi domicilio.
I leave the presidential palace today. Today I am going home even though there have been innumerable recommendations for us to act through legal action to impede this decision. And as Martin Vizcarra, I will not take any legal action.
Head of Peruvian Congress Manuel Moreno is expected to assume the presidency today. Tropical storm Eta has struck U.S. southern state of Florida with strong winds causing torrential rainfall and flooding. The storm knocked out power for over 28,000 consumers before heading back towards the Gulf of Mexico. Eta made landfall on lower Macatumbe Key with maximum sustained winds of 100 kilometers per hour. The National Hurricane Center said though the storm is headed offshore, it is still threatening Florida. Forecasters fear Eta could still cause flash flooding in the southern U.S. state. The storm is expected to slow and further strengthen over the Gulf of Mexico. In a statement, Queen Elizabeth deeply regretted the tragic loss of life and destruction caused by Hurricane Eta. In Peru, government officials have released 1,040 baby trachea turtles into the Nena River in the Amazon region. The yellow-spotted river turtle has become vulnerable due to poaching and human activities. 850,000 baby turtles are expected to be released this year. Officials said the release has been made on behalf of all the ecosystems of the Pacaya-Samiria National Reserve. Officials said they have freed some 2.5 million ticarias in the last 2 years. Local media says thousands of eggs were incubated by Peruvian environmental authorities since August. Scientists say glaciers in China's Qilian Range are disappearing at a shocking rate due to global warming. This raises the prospect of long-term water shortages. More in this report.
With the rising temperatures, the outlook is grim for the 2,684 glaciers in the Qilian Range. The largest glacier in the 800-kilometer mountain chain is set to further decay or even vanish by the mid-century. China Academy of Sciences reports glacier retreat across mountains was 50% faster during the 1990 to 2010 than it was in 1956 to 1990. Scientists say the 20-square-kilometer Laohogo Glacier has retreated around 450 meters since the 1950s.
When I first came here in 2005, the glacier was around that point there where the river curves around. But now, after around 15 years, the whole glacier has shrunk by more than 150 meters. The speed that this glacier has been shrinking is really shocking.
Since the 1950s, average temperatures have risen 1.5 degrees Celsius and snowfall has been minimal or not enough to compensate for the loss to the glaciers.
It does worry us, but now the climate across the entire world is warming and we cannot stop this warming process. The only thing we can do now is to minimize the impact of global warming on the glaciers.
Large sections of the Shule River on the outskirts of Dunhang are either dry or reduced to patches of pool. Experts have warned that peak melting in Chilean may be reached by 2050, after which the glaciers will have either disappeared or shrunk considerably.
The United States has expressed disappointment about the European Union's decision to impose tariffs on American goods. Earlier, EU Executive Vladimir Dombrovskis said the DOC will block imposed penalties on an array of U.S. imports. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer said that the EU has long proclaimed its commitment to the World Trade Organization's rules. In a statement, Lighthizer added today's announcement shows Brussels only follows WTO rules when convenient to them. The European Union is pushing ahead with a plan to hit $4 billion of American goods with tariffs. The bloc says it hopes that to settle the fight with both sides agreeing to drop countermeasures. European markets are trading mixed after vaccine news sparked a global rally. Tech stocks dropped nearly by 2%, while banks added just over 1% as signs of rotation from growth to value emerged. The pan-European stock 600 bounced either side of the flat line. Frankfurt's DAX dripped marginally. CAC in Paris advanced well over 0.5%. London's FTSE jumped close to 1%. FTSE MIB in Italy also gained marginally. Earlier, markets in the Asia-Pacific were trading mixed, while airline stocks soared. And now it's time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at Indus.News.